Fluorescent lights hummed their death song across Millfield Public Library. Tyler Brooks turned the final key, his janitor's uniform still damp with winter sweat. Silence. Then, a rustle. Paper against skin. He froze. In the shadows between towering shelves, a figure hunched over scattered textbooks like a wounded animal protecting its kill. Blonde hair cascaded over hollow cheekbones. Designer jeans, torn and stained. A leather backpack worth more than Tyler's monthly rent, now cracked and desperate. The girl's fingers trembled as she clutched a half-eaten sleeve of crackers. Her dinner, maybe her only meal in days. When she looked up, her eyes held secrets that billionaires' daughters weren't supposed to know. Fear. Real hunger. The kind of desperation that made people disappear into small towns and sleep on library floors. Tyler's calloused hand reached for his phone to call security. Instead, words tumbled out. "You can't stay here tonight." What happened next would turn his quiet world upside down. Tyler stepped closer, his work boots squeaking against polished floors. The girl's shoulders tensed like a deer caught in headlights. She scrambled to shove textbooks into her backpack. Art history, business administration, books that cost more than Tyler made in a week. "Sorry," she whispered, voice cracking. "I was just studying for finals." The accent hit him first. East Coast elite. The kind of voice that ordered wine instead of asking prices. But her hands shook as she gathered crumpled papers, and Tyler noticed dried blood on her knuckles. "Where are you supposed to be sleeping?" Tyler asked, softer now. The girl froze, a textbook halfway into her bag, her silence stretched between them like held breath. Outside, snow began falling against tall windows, each flake catching dying fluorescent light. The heating system clicked off with a mechanical sigh. In an hour, this building would be colder than the streets. "I'll figure something out," she finally said, but her voice carried the hollow ring of someone who'd run out of options. Tyler studied her face in dim light. Exhaustion had carved deep lines under eyes that should have sparkled with youth. Her hoodie hung loose on a frame that had lost too much weight too quickly. This wasn't college poverty. This was something else. Something that left expensive textbooks scattered on library floors and put fear in voices trained for boardrooms. "The shelter's full," Tyler said, though he wasn't asking. "Been full for weeks." The girl's composure cracked, just for a second, just long enough for Tyler to see the terror underneath. Snow pelted windows harder now, driven by a wind that howled through the empty parking lot. Tyler thought of Casey, 8 years old, and probably drawing another picture of their family. Always 3 figures now instead of 4, always that empty space where Sarah used to stand. Mrs. Patterson would have Casey tucked in bed with hot chocolate and stories about princesses who saved themselves. Safe, warm. Everything this girl wasn't. Tyler's keys felt heavy in his palm. One choice, help a stranger or walk away. 4 years ago, when Sarah died and left him drowning in grief and baby formula, strangers had helped. Casseroles appeared on doorsteps. Neighbors watched Casey when Tyler couldn't afford babysitters. "My apartment has a couch," Tyler heard himself say. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. The girl's head snapped up, eyes wide with disbelief. "Just for tonight," he added quickly. "Until Monday, when the library opens again." She stared at him as if he'd spoken a foreign language. Kindness, maybe. A dialect she'd forgotten. "I don't need charity," she said, but her voice wavered. Tyler almost smiled. Even desperate, she had pride. Rich girl pride, the kind that came from generations of never asking for help. "It's not charity," Tyler said, pulling on his worn winter coat. "It's January in Massachusetts. You'll freeze to death out here. He headed toward the exit, boots echoing in empty space. Behind him, he heard the whisper of nylon as she zipped her backpack. The soft pad of sneakers following. At the door, Tyler paused. "What's your name?" She hesitated, as if even that simple information was classified. "Sierra," she said finally. Not the whole truth, Tyler suspected, but enough for now. "Tyler." He pushed open the heavy glass door, and Winter rushed in to greet them. The drive to Tyler's apartment complex took 12 minutes through streets glazed with black ice. Sierra sat pressed against the passenger door, her backpack clutched like armor. She flinched when Tyler adjusted the radio, jumped when his phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson. Every few seconds, her eyes flicked to the side mirror, checking whether they were being followed. Tyler wanted to ask who she was running from, but questions felt too heavy for the warm cocoon of his truck cab. Instead, he pointed out landmarks. "That's Henderson's Hardware. Old Man Henderson fixes everything for half the price of big stores." Sierra nodded but didn't speak. Millfield Gardens apartment complex squatted like a tired giant under yellowing streetlights. Building C, Unit 12. Tyler's home for 4 years, ever since life insurance money ran out and the mortgage became impossible. The hallway smelled like fried fish and industrial carpet cleaner. Tyler's keys jangled as he unlocked 3 separate locks. Neighborhood wasn't dangerous, but old habits from Sarah's worrying died hard. "Casey," he called softly as they stepped inside. "Daddy!" The voice bubbled up from the living room, followed by thunder of 8-year-old feet racing across hardwood. Casey Brooks burst around the corner like a small, blonde tornado, pigtails flying and unicorn pajamas slightly too small. She skidded to a stop when she saw Sierra, curiosity replacing momentum in bright blue eyes. "Who's that?" she asked, with brutal directness only children possessed. Tyler's hand found Casey's shoulder, a gentle anchor. "This is Sierra. She's going to sleep on our couch tonight." Casey tilted her head, studying Sierra with intensity of a scientist examining a new specimen. "How come?" The question hung in the air. Because she was sleeping on a library floor. Because she's running from something that put bruises on her wrists. Because sometimes people need help. "Her car broke down," Tyler said instead. Simple. True enough. Casey seemed to accept this explanation with a shrug. "Are you hungry?" she asked Sierra, who stood frozen in the doorway like she'd never seen a living room before. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that opened into main living space. Worn furniture that had been nice once upon a time, children's drawings taped to the refrigerator, library books stacked on every surface. It was the kind of home that held love in its corners and laughter in its walls, even when grief sometimes crept through cracks. "I made soup," Casey announced with pride of someone who'd opened a can and heated it under careful supervision. "Chicken noodle. Daddy says it fixes everything except broken hearts. But maybe it helps those too." Sierra's composure wavered. Just for a moment, her mask slipped, and Tyler caught a glimpse of someone much younger than her 21 years. Someone who'd been broken and was still learning how to heal. "That sounds perfect," Sierra said, her voice barely above a whisper. And for the first time since Tyler had found her in the library, she almost smiled. Tyler heated soup while Sierra sat stiffly on the couch edge, Casey chattering beside her with easy confidence of someone who'd never learned to fear strangers. "What's your favorite color? Mine's purple. Do you like unicorns? Daddy says they're not real, but I think maybe they are, and they're just really good at hiding. What's in your backpack? Is it heavy? You look tired. Are you tired?" Questions tumbled over each other like puppies playing. Sierra answered in careful monosyllables, but Tyler noticed how her shoulders gradually relaxed, how her grip on the backpack loosened slightly. The kitchen timer chimed, and Tyler ladled soup into 3 mismatched bowls. Cheap ceramic from the dollar store, but clean and unchipped. He set them on the small dining table that barely fit 3 people, then called Casey to wash her hands. While they were in the bathroom, Sierra's phone buzzed against her leg. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and her face went chalk white. 47 missed calls. All from Dad. She declined the next call without answering, hands trembling as she shoved the phone back into her pocket. When Tyler returned with Casey, Sierra was staring at her soup as if it might contain answers. "So what do you study?" Tyler asked, settling into his chair. Small talk, normal conversation, the kind that didn't involve missed calls and bruised wrists. Sierra looked up, startled, as if she'd forgotten where she was. "Art history," she said after a pause. "I like learning about beautiful things people made a long time ago." Casey perked up immediately. "I like art too. Want to see my drawings?" Before Sierra could respond, Casey was off like a shot, returning with construction paper covered in crayon scribbles. "This is Daddy at work," Casey explained, pointing to a stick figure with a mop. "This is me reading at the library, and this is Mommy in heaven watching us." Sierra stared at the drawing, something shifting in her expression. "Your mom?" she started, then stopped, as if words were too heavy to finish. Casey nodded matter-of-factly. "She died when I was little, but Daddy says she still loves us from heaven, so that's okay." The simplicity of grief through a child's eyes. Tyler watched Sierra's face, saw the way her throat worked as she swallowed whatever response had died there. "She sounds like she was a wonderful person," Sierra said finally. Her voice caught on the last word, and Tyler wondered what ghosts she carried in that expensive backpack. Dinner passed quietly after that, filled with Casey's endless chatter about school and friends and library story time she never missed. Sierra ate slowly, as if she'd forgotten how food was supposed to taste when you weren't stealing it from vending machines. Tyler refilled her bowl twice without comment. When Casey finally ran out of stories and started nodding over her empty bowl, Tyler declared bedtime. "But I want to talk to Sierra more," Casey protested with half-hearted rebellion of someone actually exhausted. "Sierra will still be here in the morning," Tyler said, hoping it was true. The way she kept checking her phone suggested otherwise. After Casey was tucked into bed with her favorite stuffed elephant and a promise that Daddy would check on her later, Tyler returned to find Sierra washing dishes in the kitchen sink. She'd rolled up her sleeves, and Tyler caught sight of more bruises, finger-shaped and fresh. Someone had grabbed her. Hard. Recently. "You don't have to do that," he said, but she didn't stop. Her movements were efficient, practiced. These weren't hands of someone who'd grown up with housekeepers, despite everything else about her that screamed money. "Thank you," she said without turning around. "For dinner. For letting me stay. I know you don't know me." Tyler leaned against the counter, studying her profile in dim kitchen light. "Why are you really here, Sierra?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Her hands stilled in soapy water. For a long moment, the only sound was the drip of the faucet and distant hum of the refrigerator. "I needed to get away," she said finally. Not the whole truth, but more than she'd given anyone in weeks. "From what?" Tyler pressed gently. Sierra's shoulders tensed again, that familiar defensive posture. "Complicated family stuff," she said, which was both everything and nothing. Tyler nodded. He understood complicated family stuff, even if his complications were different from hers. "The couch pulls out into a bed," Tyler said, letting the subject drop. "Bathroom's down the hall. Towels are in the closet if you want a shower." Sierra turned then, really looking at him for the first time. "Why are you helping me?" The question hung between them, honest and raw. Tyler thought about it, searching for an answer that made sense. "Because everyone needs help sometimes," he said finally. And because my wife used to say that kindness was free, costs nothing to give, means everything to receive. Sierra's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. She sounds like she was a good person. Tyler smiled, the first real smile he'd managed in weeks. The best. Later, after Sierra had disappeared into the bathroom and Tyler had set up the pull-out couch with clean sheets and extra blankets, he sat in his bedroom thinking about the stranger sleeping in his living room. The expensive backpack with the broken zipper. The designer jeans with holes that looked torn, not distressed. The accent that came from boarding schools and country clubs, paired with the kind of fear that came from running out of safe places to hide. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson. "Casey's asleep. Sweet dreams, Tyler." He smiled and typed back thanks, then hesitated before adding, "Everything's fine here." But as he lay in bed listening to unfamiliar sounds of someone else moving through his space, Tyler wondered if that was really true. In the living room, Sierra stared at the ceiling and counted her heartbeats. 112, 113. The pull-out couch was more comfortable than any bed she'd slept in for weeks, but sleep felt impossible. Her phone sat silent on the coffee table, but she knew it wouldn't stay that way. By morning, her father would have traced her location. By afternoon, there would be men in expensive suits knocking on Tyler's door. She should leave, disappear into the night, and spare this kind man and his daughter the chaos that followed in her wake like a storm system. But Casey's drawing lay on the coffee table, stick figures holding hands under a crayon sun. A family, the kind Sierra had never had, even with all her father's money. She must have dozed, because the next thing she knew, morning light was streaming through thin curtains and the smell of pancakes was drifting from the kitchen. Sierra sat up, momentarily disoriented. The apartment. Tyler. Casey. Real life, not the nightmare she'd been living for weeks. She padded to the kitchen, following the sound of sizzling batter and Casey's animated voice. "Daddy, can Sierra have Mickey Mouse-shaped ones too?" Tyler stood at the stove, hair sticking up in back, wearing a t-shirt that had seen better days. He looked so normal, so safe, so temporary. "Morning," Tyler said without turning around, somehow sensing her presence. "Coffee's on the counter." Casey insisted on the full breakfast experience. Sierra poured coffee into a chipped mug that read, "World's Best Dad," and wondered when she'd last experienced anything close to a full breakfast experience. Room service in hotels didn't count. Neither did protein bars eaten standing up in gas station parking lots. This was different. This was home. "How do you take it?" Tyler asked, nodding toward the coffee. "Black's fine," Sierra said, wrapping fingers around warm ceramic. Simple pleasures. When had she stopped noticing them? Casey bounced into this kitchen wearing fresh clothes and a grin that could power the entire building. "Sierra, you stayed! Daddy wasn't sure you would, but I knew you would because you seem nice, and nice people don't just disappear." The words tumbled out in one excited breath, and Sierra felt something crack inside her chest. When was the last time someone had called her nice and meant it? When was the last time someone had wanted her to stay? Tyler set a plate of Mickey Mouse pancakes in front of her, the ears slightly lopsided but perfect in their imperfection. "Castle Casey strikes again," he said with mock resignation. "She's been designing breakfast since she was 6. They ate at the small table, Casey chattering about weekend plans, and Tyler making gentle corrections about manners and not talking with her mouth full. Normal family chaos. The kind Sierra had observed from the outside, but never participated in. Her phone stayed blessedly quiet through breakfast, though she found herself checking it compulsively. Every buzz of Tyler's phone made her jump. Every car door that slammed in the parking lot sent her pulse racing. She was living on borrowed time, and they all knew it, even if no one said it aloud. The question wasn't if her past would catch up to her. The question was how much damage it would do when it arrived. "So," Tyler said as Casey ran to her room to get dressed, What's the plan? He wasn't pushing, but Sierra could hear practical concern in his voice. She was a problem that needed solving, a complication in his carefully ordered life. She should be grateful he'd given her 12 hours of safety. She should gather her things and disappear before her chaos contaminated his peace. Instead, she heard herself saying, "I don't have one." The honesty surprised them both. Sierra had always had plans, backup plans for her backup plans. Trust fund girls didn't survive in the real world without strategies. But sitting in Tyler's kitchen, wearing yesterday's clothes and eating pancakes shaped like cartoon mice, she realized she was completely, utterly lost. Tyler studied her face, and Sierra wondered what he saw there. Fear, certainly. Exhaustion. The kind of bone-deep weariness that sleep couldn't fix. "You could stay another day," he said carefully. "Figure things out? Casey would like that." As if summoned by her name, Casey reappeared in the doorway, tugging a brush through tangled hair. "Are we going to story time at the library today?" she asked hopefully. Saturday tradition, Sierra realized. Father and daughter, books and belonging, the kind of routine that built childhoods worth remembering. "If Sierra wants to come," Tyler said, glancing at her. An invitation, an inclusion, a chance to be part of something real, even if just for one morning. The library felt different in daylight, filled with families and laughter instead of shadows and silence. Children sprawled on colorful rugs while a librarian read stories about brave animals and magical kingdoms. Casey found her usual spot near the front, patting carpet beside her in clear invitation. Sierra folded herself onto the floor, acutely aware of how out of place she must look among other parents. Designer jeans among discount store denim, manicured nails that hadn't seen real work among hands that knew dishwater and overtime shifts. But Casey beamed up at her with pure delight, and for a moment, Sierra forgot about everything except the story being told. The princess decided she didn't want to be rescued, the librarian read, her voice animated with different character voices. She wanted to do the rescuing herself. Sierra's throat tightened. How long since she'd tried to rescue herself? How long since she'd been anything more than a chess piece in her father's elaborate games? Casey leaned against her shoulder, warm and trusting, and Sierra felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Belonging. It was temporary, borrowed, built on lies she'd have to confess eventually. But for this moment, in this circle of children and stories, she was just Sierra. Not Whitman Industries heiress, not merger bait, not disappointing daughter. Just someone who mattered because she was here. After story time, they walked home through streets glazed with fresh snow. Casey skipped between Tyler and Sierra, holding both their hands, chattering about the story and weekend plans. "Can we make hot chocolate?" she asked. "The kind with marshmallows that look like little snowmen?" Tyler nodded, smiling at his daughter's enthusiasm. Sierra watched them together. This father who worked multiple jobs to give his child everything that mattered. This little girl who radiated joy despite losing her mother so young. They had so little by her father's standards, so much by any standard that actually counted. Sierra's phone buzzed against her leg. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. She pulled it out without thinking, the familiar dread settling in her stomach like cold stone. 63 missed calls now, all from Dad. The most recent text made her blood freeze. "Sierra, enough games. Come home now, or I'll make you come home." The threat was clear. Douglas Whitman didn't make idle promises. He had resources, connections, the kind of power that could reach into small Massachusetts towns and extract wayward daughters without leaving fingerprints. Sierra shoved the phone back into her pocket, but Tyler had already noticed her face going pale. "Everything okay?" he asked. The concern in his voice made her chest tight. When had anyone worried about her without calculating what her well-being was worth to them? "I should probably go," Sierra said, the words tasting like ash. Casey's face fell immediately. "But we're going to make hot chocolate and watch a movie. Daddy promised." The disappointment in her voice was devastating. How long since anyone had been disappointed by Sierra's absence rather than her presence? "I don't want to impose," Sierra said weakly, but Tyler was already shaking his head. "You're not imposing. Stay, at least until tomorrow." Another day, another 24 hours of pretending she was someone who deserved kindness, someone who could sit on couches and drink hot chocolate and watch movies without bringing chaos and danger to everyone around her. The afternoon passed in a blur of domestic normalcy that felt more foreign than any boarding school Sierra had attended. Hot chocolate with marshmallows that Casey carefully arranged into snowman faces. A Disney movie that Tyler pretended to find boring, but secretly knew all the words to. Sierra curled into corner of the couch, Casey leaning against her side, Tyler's presence solid and comforting on the other end. This was what families did. She realized. They existed together in comfortable spaces, sharing small rituals that meant everything and nothing. Her father's idea of family time had always involved board meetings and charity galas, networking disguised as affection. Halfway through the movie, Casey fell asleep against Sierra's shoulder, her breathing deep and even. Tyler muted the television, and suddenly the only sounds were the heating system's gentle hum and distant murmur of other families living their Saturday afternoon lives. "She likes you," Tyler said quietly, careful not to wake his daughter. "She doesn't usually warm up to people so quickly." Sierra looked down at Casey's peaceful face, struck by how young she looked in sleep. 8 years old, the same age Sierra had been when her mother died, when her father had stopped seeing her as a daughter and started grooming her as a business asset. "She's amazing," Sierra whispered back. "You're doing something right." Tyler's smile was soft but tinged with ever-present worry of single parenthood. "Some days I'm not so sure. It's hard doing it alone, never knowing if you're making the right choices." Sierra nodded, understanding more than he knew. "At least you're making choices for love," she said. "Some parents make them for other reasons." The words slipped out before she could stop them, revealing more than she intended. Tyler studied her face in dim light from the television. "Your parents?" he asked gently. Sierra's throat worked, but no words came. How could she explain Douglas Whitman to someone like Tyler? How could she make him understand the suffocating weight of inherited expectations? Her phone buzzed again, and this time Tyler heard it too. "You should answer that," he said. "Maybe it's important." Sierra almost laughed. Important. Yes, her father's fury was always important. His need for control always took precedence over everything else, including his daughter's happiness. "It's my dad," she said finally. "He's upset with me." The understatement of the year. Tyler waited, sensing there was more to the story. "He wants me to come home," Sierra continued. "To take my place in the family business, to marry someone he's chosen for me, to stop being selfish and start being useful." The bitterness in her voice surprised them both. "And you don't want that," Tyler said. It wasn't a question. Sierra shook her head, careful not to disturb Casey. "I want to teach," she said. "Art history, maybe elementary art. I want to work with kids like Casey, help them see that the world is full of beautiful things worth protecting." She paused, then added quietly, "My father thinks that's a waste of my potential, a betrayal of everything he's built." Tyler was quiet for a long moment, processing the weight of what she'd shared. "What do you think?" he asked finally. The question caught Sierra off guard. When was the last time someone had asked what she thought, what she wanted, what she believed? "I think," Sierra said slowly, "that I've spent so long trying to be what other people needed me to be that I've forgotten who I actually am." The confession hung between them like a bridge. Tyler nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. "After Sarah died," he said, "everyone had opinions about what Casey and I should do. Move closer to family, sell the house, put Casey in daycare so I could work more hours. Everyone knew what was best for us except us." He looked down at his sleeping daughter. "Sometimes the right choice isn't the easy one. Sometimes it means disappointing people who think they know better." Sierra's phone buzzed again, and this time she turned it off completely. Whatever consequences waited for her in voicemail boxes and text messages could wait a little longer. Right now, in this moment, she was exactly where she wanted to be. Casey stirred against her shoulder, mumbling something about hot chocolate in her sleep. Tyler carefully lifted his daughter, carrying her to her bedroom with practiced ease of single parenthood. Sierra watched him go, struck by the tenderness in his movements, the way he tucked Casey in and brushed hair from her forehead before tiptoeing back to the living room. Love in action, the kind her father had never learned to show. "She's lucky to have you," Sierra said when Tyler returned. He settled back onto the couch, leaving careful space between them. "We're lucky to have each other," he corrected, "even when it's hard, even when I have no idea what I'm doing." They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of shared confidences settling around them like a blanket. Outside, snow continued to fall, coating the world in temporary softness. Sierra tried to memorize the moment, the warmth of the apartment, the sound of Tyler's quiet breathing, the sense of safety she hadn't felt in months. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tonight, she was home. Sunday morning arrived with sound of Casey singing off-key in the shower and smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. Sierra woke on the pull-out couch feeling more rested than she had in weeks, despite unfamiliar surroundings. For a moment, she let herself imagine this was her life, that she belonged in this small apartment with these kind people who asked for nothing more than her company. Then reality crashed back, heavy and inevitable. Her phone, powered on again, showed 89 missed calls and 43 unread text messages. Her father's patience, never abundant, had clearly run out. The most recent message made her hands shake. "Sierra Elizabeth Whitman, you have 12 hours to call me back, or I'm sending people to find you. This game ends now." Not a request, not a plea. A command from a man accustomed to being obeyed. Sierra knew her father well enough to know he didn't make idle threats. By tonight, there would be private investigators combing through Millfield. By tomorrow, they'd have her location. By Tuesday, she'd be back in Greenwich, sitting in her father's study while he explained exactly how her rebellion had disappointed him and damaged the family reputation. Tyler found her in the kitchen, staring at her phone like it might explode. "Bad news?" he asked, though her expression probably told him everything he needed to know. Sierra nodded, not trusting her voice. How could she explain that her 12 hours of borrowed happiness were coming to an end? That soon, men in expensive suits would descend on his quiet life like vultures, asking questions he couldn't answer about a girl he barely knew. "I should go," she said finally, "before I cause you trouble." The words came out rough, scraped raw by the effort of saying them. "What kind of trouble?" Tyler asked, settling beside her at the small table. His presence was steady, grounding, everything Sierra's life had never been. She wanted to lean into that strength, but she'd learned long ago that depending on others only led to disappointment. "The kind you don't deserve," she said instead. "The kind that follows girls like me wherever we go." Tyler was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "Girls like you," he repeated. What does that mean? Sierra almost smiled at the irony. If only he knew. If only she could tell him that girls like her came with trust funds and security details, with fathers who owned senators and mothers who'd died in suspicious car accidents when asking too many questions about family business. Before Sierra could answer, Casey bounded into the kitchen wearing mismatched socks and a grin that could light up the entire building. Morning, Sierra. Did you sleep good? I dreamed about unicorns. Do you like pancakes? Daddy makes the best pancakes in the whole world, don't you, Daddy? The rapid-fire questions were delivered with breathless enthusiasm only 8-year-olds could manage. Sierra caught Tyler's eye over Casey's head, saw the love and pride there, and felt her heart crack just a little more. She was about to destroy this. Her presence would bring chaos and questions, and the kind of attention that normal families like this one couldn't survive. Actually, Sierra said carefully, I think I need to head out today. I've imposed on your kindness long enough. Casey's face fell immediately, confusion and disappointment warring in her expression. But it's Sunday. We always make big breakfast on Sunday, and then we go to the park if it's not snowing too much. The protest came out in a rush, as if Casey could convince Sierra to stay through sheer enthusiasm. Tyler's hand found his daughter's shoulder, a gentle warning not to push, but Sierra could see questions in his eyes too. Why the sudden rush to leave? What had changed between Saturday night's contentment and Sunday morning's desperation? Sierra's phone buzzed against the table, and all three of them stared at it, like a snake coiled to strike. The caller ID flashed Dad in stark letters. Sierra's finger hovered over the decline button, but she knew avoiding the call would only make things worse. Douglas Whitman was many things: cold, calculating, ruthlessly determined. But he was also her father, the only family she had left, even if that family came with strings attached and expectations that felt like chains around her ankles. She looked at Tyler, then at Casey, memorizing their faces for lonely days ahead. I have to take this, she said quietly. She stepped into the hallway outside Tyler's apartment, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The hallway was empty, but she could feel the weight of other families behind their own doors, Sunday morning routines playing out in comfortable repetition. Normal lives. The kind she'd glimpsed but never lived. Sierra accepted the call, steeling herself for the storm about to break. Hello, Dad. Her voice came out steadier than she felt, a skill learned in countless boardroom meetings where showing weakness meant losing ground you'd never recover. Sierra Elizabeth. Douglas Whitman's voice carried cold fury of a man who'd spent the weekend fielding calls from private investigators and security teams. Do you have any idea what you've put me through? What you've put the company through? The merger with Morrison Industries depends on stability, and you've been gallivanting around New England like some common runaway. The words hit like physical blows, not concern for her safety, not relief that she was alive and unharmed, just anger that her absence had complicated his business dealings. Sierra closed her eyes, leaning against the hallway wall for support. I'm fine, Dad. I'm safe. I just needed some time to think. The response was automatic, rehearsed from years of deflecting his anger. But Douglas wasn't interested in her well-being. He never had been. Time to think? His laugh was sharp, humorless. About what? About throwing away everything I've built? About destroying partnerships that took decades to establish? About embarrassing our family in front of people who matter? People who matter. As if Sierra herself didn't matter. As if her happiness, her dreams, her fundamental right to choose her own path were all secondary to business relationships and profit margins. I don't want to marry Bradley Morrison, Sierra said, words coming out stronger than she'd intended. I don't want to join the company. I want to teach, Dad. I want to work with children, help them discover art and creativity and... Douglas's interruption cut through her words like a blade. Enough. This conversation is over. You have 6 hours to return home voluntarily, or I'll send people to collect you. And Sierra?" His voice dropped to dangerous quiet that had terrified her as a child. "When you come home, we're going to have a very serious discussion about responsibility and consequences. Don't test me on this." The line went dead, leaving Sierra staring at her phone in the empty hallway. 6 hours. She had 6 hours before her father's reach extended into Millfield, before Tyler and Casey got caught in crossfire of a war they didn't understand. 6 hours to disappear again, to find another library or shelter or park bench where she could hide until Douglas Whitman lost interest in retrieving his wayward investment. But the thought of leaving, of walking away from the first real warmth she'd felt in years, made her chest tight with an ache that had nothing to do with physical pain. Sierra slipped back into the apartment to find Tyler and Casey setting the table for 3, as if her presence was assumed, as if she belonged here. Casey looked up hopefully. "Are you staying for pancakes?" The question was asked with innocent faith of someone who'd never learned that good things often disappeared without warning. Sierra's throat closed around the truth. How could she explain to this child that some people weren't allowed to stay? That some people brought danger wherever they went, like storms that destroyed everything in their path? "I wish I could," Sierra said instead, the partial truth all she could manage. "But I really do need to go." Tyler studied her face, taking in pale complexion and trembling hands that hadn't been there before her phone call. "Everything okay?" he asked, but Sierra could see in his eyes that he already knew the answer. Nothing was okay. Nothing had been okay for a very long time, and her brief taste of normal life had only made the contrast more painful. "Family stuff," she said, which was both everything and nothing, the same non-answer she'd been giving for months. Casey, with persistence that made her such an effective 8-year-old, wasn't ready to give up. "Can't you tell your family you're having pancakes with us? Families should understand about pancakes. They're important." The logic was flawless, delivered with seriousness only children could bring to truly important matters. Sierra knelt down to Casey's level, taking in earnest face and bright eyes that saw the world as fundamentally good, where problems could be solved with explanation, and families always wanted what was best for each other. She wanted to protect that innocence, even if it meant breaking her own heart to do it. "Some families are complicated," Sierra said gently. "Sometimes people who love you don't always understand what makes you happy." Casey considered this with gravity of a philosopher. "That's silly," she announced finally. "If you love someone, you want them to be happy. That's how love works." Out of the mouths of babes. Sierra glanced at Tyler, saw a mixture of pride and pain in his expression as he watched his daughter navigate concepts that shouldn't be part of an 8-year-old's world. But loss had taught Casey wisdom beyond her years, just as privilege had taught Sierra lessons about power and control that no child should have to learn. Tyler cleared his throat, breaking the moment with gentle practicality. "I could drive you somewhere," he offered, "if you need a ride to a bus station or airport." The kindness in the offer made Sierra's chest ache. Even now, knowing she was about to walk out of their lives forever, he was trying to help. She shook her head, not trusting her voice to stay steady. She had money. Had always had money, even when she was pretending to be broke. Credit cards her father hadn't cancelled yet. Cash she'd withdrawn before going underground. Resources that could get her anywhere she wanted to go, as long as where she wanted to go wasn't home. "Thank you," she said instead. "For everything. For the soup and the couch and the movie and—" She gestured helplessly at the warm apartment, at drawings on the refrigerator, at evidence of love lived daily in small gestures. "For showing me what a real family looks like." Tyler's expression softened, understanding more than she'd said aloud. "You're welcome here anytime," he said, and Sierra could hear truth in his voice. If circumstances were different, if she were different, she could have a place at this table, in this life. But circumstances were what they were, and Sierra Whitman came with complications Tyler Brooks didn't deserve. She gathered her backpack, checking to make sure she had everything. Not that there was much. A few changes of clothes, textbooks she'd probably never need again, identification documents that would lead her father right to her if she used them. Casey followed her to the door, a small shadow radiating disappointment. "Will you come back?" she asked, the question heavy with kind of hope that could break hearts. Sierra knelt down one more time, memorizing the feel of Casey's small arms around her neck, scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood. "I hope so," she said, because sometimes hope was all you could offer, even when you knew better. The goodbye lingered in the doorway, stretching like taffy until Sierra finally forced herself to step into the hallway. Tyler followed, closing the door behind him so Casey couldn't hear their final words. "If you're in trouble," he said quietly, "real trouble, there are people who can help. Resources, legal aid." Sierra smiled sadly, touched by his assumption that her problems were the kind ordinary people faced. Abusive boyfriends, financial difficulties, immigration issues, problems that had solutions, that could be fixed with restraining orders and social services and good lawyers. "It's not that kind of trouble," she said, "but thank you. For everything." She turned to go, then stopped, words rising before she could stop them. "Tyler?" He waited, patient as always. "Take care of yourself. And Casey, don't let anyone convince you that what you have here isn't enough. It's everything." She walked away before he could respond, before tears threatening behind her eyes could fall. At the end of the hallway, she turned back once, saw him still standing in his doorway watching her go. The image burned itself into her memory. A good man letting go of someone he couldn't save, accepting that some battles weren't his to fight. 3 weeks later, Tyler found himself staring at the local newspaper's front page over his morning coffee. The headline read, "Federal Investigation Nets Financial Criminal." Below it, a photograph of a man in handcuffs being led from a Greenwich mansion. Douglas Whitman, CEO of Whitman Industries, arrested on charges of money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud. The article mentioned cooperating witnesses and ongoing investigations, but no names were given. Tyler studied the man's face. Silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of cold fury that suggested this was far from over. He looked like someone who'd never heard the word no, who'd built his life around control and power. Casey appeared at his elbow, drawn by unusual sight of her father reading newspaper at breakfast. "Who's that man, Daddy?" she asked, squinting at the photograph. Tyler folded the paper carefully, filing information away for later consideration. "No one we know, sweetheart," he said, which was both true and false. They didn't know Douglas Whitman, but Tyler was beginning to suspect they'd known his daughter. The timing was too convenient. Sierra's desperate phone calls, her fear of going home, her expensive belongings paired with desperate circumstances. The pieces fit together like a puzzle he wished he'd never had to solve. 2 weeks later, a package arrived at Tyler's apartment with no return address. Inside, Casey found a brand new art set, professional quality supplies that must have cost more than Tyler made in a month. Watercolors and brushes, sketching pencils and paper, everything a budding artist could want. There was no note, but Tyler didn't need one. He knew who had sent it, just as he knew they'd probably never see Sierra again. Casey, delighted with her unexpected gift, spread paper across kitchen table and began to paint. Her first creation was a family portrait, Tyler, Casey, and a third figure with blonde hair and a smile that looked like hope. "Who's that?" Tyler asked, though he already knew. Casey looked up from her painting, brush poised in midair, That's Sierra, she said matter-of-factly. She's not here, but she's still part of our family. People don't stop being family just because they have to go away. Tyler nodded, understanding more than his 8-year-old daughter realized she'd taught him. Family wasn't just about who stayed. Sometimes it was about who loved you enough to leave. Sometimes it was about brief moments of connection that changed you forever, even when they couldn't last. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it was about art supplies that arrived without explanation and paintings that kept memories alive long after the people who inspired them had disappeared into witness protection programs and new identities, carrying love with them wherever they went.